Hi, Christian.
How are you today?
Oh, I'm okay. Jack of exams, so you can see. So that's my delight for the weekend.
Have fun with that one.
Oh, yeah. I want to make time to talk to you. And I don't know how to do this because I'm gone a lot of next week, but she's in power. I need to catch up on. Um, yeah, I don't know when to do that, but I think it's probably should be soon. I don't know if they've contacted you.
They've contacted me about if they were going to keep working with me next semester, if that's what you're.
Okay, so yeah, it's probably only a 15-minute conversation, but longer than now. So that there are complexities. So and I want you to know because I think they talked to Brian, and of course, Brian didn't tell them they needed to talk to you. So
Sounds good.
yeah, so that I sent you a list of things, but I think that has the most urgency, even if other things are.
Sure. Can you give me the snapshot? Quick one?
Yeah, they are passing off control of the organization to another organization.
Yeah, okay. Double
And
checking
that,
it wasn't something tied specifically to my students. I guess that's what I was figuring out.
yeah, so that organization is, they've told them that they can have space at Powerhouse.
Huh, sounds good.
And I didn't think it was that easy. And that's, I believe, going to be part of the MOU. So
Uh,
I emphasize that you really should be involved or the pug should be involved or whatever.
Thank you. That's good. Heads up. Appreciate it.
Okay. Hi. A new face. Super exciting. Are you here in Fort Collins?
I'm currently in Boston, Mass. So I'm working
Okay.
remotely.
And are you planning to be in Fort Collins?
Not anytime soon.
Not anytime soon. Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah,
so
we're gonna make it work, I think.
mhm,
I've had a postdoc remote before and it's been successful. Makes it more accessible.
for sure. Yeah, and then we'll have to see how the interface measures work, but I'm sure you've had lots of experience with that. Well, I'm just going to get started. Maybe while we're waiting for people to show up, the one thing that I wanted to bring up is that a lot of people have marked out 2 weeks from today, which is near graduation weekend. I'm thinking we should just cancel that event. And then Will, who is not here or not here yet, had offered to do something about his past research on that day. And I'll check with him about whether that's okay. I don't think we have anything on tap for next week. So, Paul, I know you moved off your filter testing. I don't know if you'd be ready to report then.
What do you think, Misa? Can we pull something together for next week?
We can try. We will attempt to.
In
Try
other
or
words,
not.
I think in other words, that means yes.
There is no try. Okay, good. Thanks, guys. And then, as mentioned in the email, Erica's hired a new postdoc. So either Pi, would you like to introduce yourself, or Erica, you can follow up with saying something about him.
Should I go first?
Certainly.
Hi, so I'm Pi. I'm a recently graduated PhD student from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. My specialties has been research in human factors and user research in terms of mostly driver behaviors as well as human-machine interaction with uh, user interfaces and driving. What you guys are doing is a very new avenue for me to explore, but I think it involves a lot of skills that I've already honed over the years, and I hope to contribute to your project meaningfully. So yeah, that's that about me.
Erica, do you want to say anything else?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good explanation. Yeah. I think I met Pi in like 2018 when I was interviewing for a faculty position. So I've known him for a while and we run into each other at conferences. Yeah, and similar to me, his background is predominantly in the transportation domain, but he's really excited to move out of transportation and expand the human factors lens. So he's going to be really enthusiastic to learn what we're all doing here and yeah, and bring his expertise on human factors and HMIs.
And Pi, I think there is not, there may not be a program in the United States in graduate school where you could come out with an understanding of what you need to do this project. So please feel free to ask any of us for like, what was that word? Or what do you mean? Or can I just talk to you afterwards so I can hear more about that? I thought we could maybe introduce ourselves to Pi in a quick getting to know you. Say your name. Instead of saying what you do on the project, just say one thing you have learned from your work on the project to give a sense. And then since Pi is staying in Boston right now, you should give him one reason that he should move to Fort Collins. Okay, so I'm going to put an order in the chat. Erica, we can start with you since you know him, and then I'll get an order in the chat after you.
I already forgot what the prompt was, but my name's
Hey,
Eric
one thing you learned
Gallegos.
and one reason to move to Fort Collins.
Okay. One thing I've learned is, yeah, I've really seen this opportunity for human factors in the air quality space, and I actually have 3 projects now, I think, that have to do with air quality measurements. So y'all have taught me quite a bit, and I'm excited about that element. And yeah, it's a lot sunnier in Fort Collins than it is in Boston.
Oops. Okay, so Misa, you're next.
Okay.
And I accidentally put Pi's name on because I didn't, didn't recognize it as Pi. Okay, Misa, then Marilee.
Okay. Well, I'm Misa. I'm a research associate working for Tammy, also doing some stuff for Paul. One thing that I've learned, there's a lot of abbreviations in the world of air quality. AQI is air quality index. IAQ is indoor air quality. You'll pick it up. You'll pick it up. EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, right? There's a lot of terms that gradually you'll get to learn. I came here from a biomedical engineering background, so I didn't really have a lot of crossover. One reason you should move to Fort Collins, I moved here in August, and one thing that I thought was really unique was that Winnie had kind of touched up on yesterday from a conversation, but it's very sunny, but it can rain. And when that happens, there's a lot of rainbows that happen at once. That's like pretty incredible that I had never seen before. Which I don't know if that happens in Boston, but I think it's pretty cool.
You gotta have a sun to have a rainbow.
Mhm.
Boston doesn't have sun.
I'm Marilee Long. I'm part of the team. I worked a lot with Erika, so I'm looking forward to you joining our team. I'm out of the journalism and media comm department, and I do a lot of work with messaging about health effects and humans and trying to encourage behavior change. The things I've learned on the project, one of the neat things, and not in a bad way, is how complicated homes are, and a better understanding of that, and like how to communicate that to people who aren't thinking of their home in that way, and that the importance of how the home affects your health. So I'm learning a lot more about that. And I would recommend coming to Fort Collins because if you like to ride a bike, it's a good place to be. whether it's a beater bike or a new electric bike or, any kind, we've got a lot of good bike trails. And if you go the right way, the wind helps you a lot. If you're going against the wind, not so much fun, but once you learn the prevailing winds, you can get places pretty quickly.
Hey, Pi, I'm Dominic. I work with Tammy in doing diagnostic testing for pressures. And one of the main things I learned is just kind of how to build procedures for going into people's homes and taking measurements. I mean, something I really hadn't done before and was something that didn't come right away, but came through a stretch that I got to learn a whole lot. So that was really awesome. And Marilee actually read my mind. I was just about to say, I don't know how much biking you do, but there's some awesome trails that you can explore. But
Christian, you're up.
Nice to meet you. My name is Christian Larange. I'm faculty in mechanical engineering, working mostly on the technology development side of things. I have been surprised to learn how small of environmental conditions really can change the pressure in homes. I didn't have a good grasp of how sensitive that was. Why did I come to Fort Collins? There's so many reasons. I've worked actively for 20 years not to leave here. So I guess I'll go with your dollar goes a lot farther here than it does in Boston.
No pressure.
Hi, I'm Whitney. I work with Paul Francisco kind of over on the other side of the powerhouse hallway. So my participation on this project is much more auxiliary. I've been helping out with some of the tablet deployment into the field while Tammy has been waiting for Aaliyah to arrive. So I would say the thing I've learned most on this project, because I'm not really involved in the technical components of it, is really how the communications team functions and kind of their role in connecting with and kind of supporting the participants in the research. And then also it's just given me a really good big picture view on kind of how some of these teams come together and interact, and then kind of sort of spoke out to other projects, and it's really given me a really cool view on the level of collaboration that's happening across different projects across the powerhouse. So on that note, I would say that's one reason you should come, is because I think you would get a really nice deep integration into the way that the teams at the powerhouse actually collaborate with one another. And from what I can tell, it's different than other universities, and it's different than even other areas of CSU. And it's pretty cool to watch, especially as a newbie, as of November 1st. So culturally, I would say Fort Collins is full of really nice, really happy people who are excited to be here and are excited about life. And so if that's the kind of people you want to surround yourself with, I think you'll be really happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Elson Carter, and I'm in civil and environmental engineering. And I think something that I've learned on this project is actually through Erika's work and the work you might be involved in, just the potential for transferability of what's been learned in the HMI space for transportation into homes. Could be interested in that. I appreciate Fort Collins as a gateway to the West. Being from the Midwest, it always felt like a really big undertaking to get out to the Western US, and being here, a lot more places feel like within a day's travel. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Pi. I'm Aaliyah. As you already heard, I am working with Tammy. I'm her program manager, and I've only been here for a month, so I'm also very, very new to all of this. And that being said, I've learned a lot, but I can't really verbalize all of it at this time. But maybe the biggest thing I've really been understanding or trying to understand is how we can tell our story at the different levels. So we had the participants, which Whitney mentioned, general or larger organizations that we interface with. through to people who are actually doing the work in the field, to academics, and trying to understand those various levels a little bit more. And it's been really interesting to see how that all interfaces. I have many reasons why you should move here, because I moved from Boston after 4 years there. So I could go on a very long list. But the main one, aside from the weather, which really is significantly better, is also you will never have to parallel park again. And you don't have to drive in the terrible Boston traffic. So that's a really good move right there. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm sold now.
Jordan, sorry, we missed you.
Yeah, hi Ganesh. I'm Jordan. I work with Dr. LaRange, Christian LaRange. We build stuff and we make things work. And that's kind of what I do. I try to build more things than I break, and I ride that fine line. One thing I've learned is similar to what Marilee said. It's a home environment is very, very complex, and it's easy to build something that takes care of, you know, like a problem, but to address like the comfort level and all of the like the noise, the cost, all of those things that need to be taken into account for a home. It adds another level of complexity, and a home is really it's got everything going for it. So it's really fun, and the mechanical and human side is just you're gonna have a lot of fun. Welcome to the team.
Thank you all. Really nice to meet you, and nice to learn about your background. And I'm quite sold about Fort Collins at this point. They're really good friends. All right.
Paul and then me. And did I miss anyone?
No, we're the last two.
Okay, when I don't go in order, then I just get all turned around.
I'm Paul. I do a lot of stuff with building science. I'll say that I could talk about some technical things or some communications things that I've learned, but I think one of the things I really learned in this project is just how an interdisciplinary team can truly work together very well if they want to and are intentional about it. So, and there's, you know, not such big eyes, little U's. It's really a team, and it's just been really great to see how we've all worked together that way. In terms of why to come to Fort Collins instead of Boston, I'll be a little sarcastic in a way. In Boston, they root for the Red Sox, the Bruins, the Celtics, and the Patriots. And in Fort Collins, they don't.
Hey.
No Nuggets for the win.
Almost anybody else.
Okay, well, I guess I'm last. I'm Tammy. I'm PI of the project. I do diagnostics, which I mean I try to figure out what's going on in homes, and I try to keep folks hanging together. So I'm going to go to the totally other end. One of the things I learned in this project that is very technical is I thought the pressures in my house would change vastly when I opened the windows, and it turns out they actually don't. So let's see, why should you move to Fort Collins? People mentioned the trails, but it's not just bike trails. So there's also very good hiking and rocky trails, which are very, very fun for running on. So you don't have to use a bicycle. You don't actually need any equipment at all, except maybe a good pair of shoes and some patience. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Hope to see you here. But if you stay in Boston, we'll be happy to see your smiling face on Zoom calls every Friday. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it over to Erika, because we've been waiting for a long time to hear from Erika. And I hope I didn't take too much of a bite out of your presentation, Erika, with our introductions, but it's just nice to be a little bit casual for a while. I am recording this because we have so long awaited your presentation to us, and it'll be recorded for posterity. And Pi, just you should know that we do record many of the technical presentations. They're on a YouTube channel. So if you want to catch up on something, that's another way to learn.
All right, thank
All
you. Well, I
yours.
hope Tammy didn't build this up too much. All right, I think y'all can see my screen. Perfect. Let me just reorient my screens. Oops. All right, so I am going to talk a little bit today about my work with human-machine interfaces. You're going to see me refer to those as HMIs throughout the rest, just because that's easier to type. And specifically on how I've been using HMIs for behavior intent, so changing people's behavior, and then also helping them calibrate their trust appropriately to systems capabilities and functionality. And this is pretty, I would say it's adjacent to what we've been working on, because of course, as we go into the houses, we're developing these HMIs. And so I really tried to focus on what sort of performance metrics I have been able to capture from my work with HMIs. I'm only going to talk about, I think, 3 case studies. There's a lot more, but these are the 3 that I chose to discuss today. And so for those of you not too familiar with the predominant bulk of my research is in the transportation domain. And so that's just a QR code to my lab website if you're interested in seeing some of the projects my students are working on. And so at the powerhouse, I have the driving simulator on the 3rd floor, which is that picture on the left side. And then on the right side, I do quite a bit of work also on a closed track. So the Chrisman Airfield is a decommissioned airport at the Foothills campus, basically. And so it has a 1 mile long runway strip, so we can go out there and we can, have autonomous vehicles and we can walk in front of them and see if, they'll stop for us, or if, we can understand the HMI inside of it, etc. So done some work out there. And then recently I've been going into the virtual reality space, and this morning actually I had a kickoff meeting. We're going to do some work with the hazmat team in Boulder County and do some training for when they go into hazmat sites and check, air quality, etc. We're doing some training and simulating that in the VR environment. I have a PhD student that works at NIST, and so it's really through his work at NIST that I have the opportunity to do that work. So a little bit of work in the virtual reality space as well. So I thought I would just cue this up with a few theoretical foundations, just that really frame a lot of my work. I think Marilee a couple weeks ago did a good job also giving some human behavior and human behavior kind of foundational theory, but there's a few others that I think are pertinent to this discussion today. And I also have my eye on the chat, so if anyone wants me to stop or have a comment, please feel free to interrupt me. So the first one is the technology acceptance model. Probably several of you have heard of this before. This is, a really influential model in understanding how people actually use systems and how they intend to use systems. And so essentially it all boils down to how people perceive the usefulness of a system and how they perceive the usefulness of its actual functionality really shapes what their attitude towards a system is, and then eventually what their intent to use a system is, and then that predicts their actual engagement with a system. And so if we can change perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use, that has a huge impact on how people actually use a system. Another foundational element is trust. I do quite a bit of work in trust. I think it comes down to most of my research questions are rooted in, like, can we measure someone's trust in a system? And so trust is this attitude that an agent will help you achieve your goals in situations characterized by uncertainty and vulnerability. So trust really influences people's use with a system, and then their reliance, and whether they're over relying on it, under relying on a system, or, trusting it appropriately. So I tend to break down trust into, does the system perform what it's actually supposed to be doing? Is it predictable? Is it consistent? Is it safe? And is it reliable? And so those are the underlying constructs of trust that I usually try to assess when I'm trying to understand someone's trust in a system. And there's several factors that influence how much someone is willing to trust a system. So you can design the system, but also there's, individual personal factors that change people's willingness to adopt technology. And so really comes back to Rogers's innovation adoption curve that he proposed. And basically you can split the population into these 5 groups where you have these early adopters and innovators, which are willing to try new technology. They're excited about it. They tend to be riskier, and they're more willing to, you know, accept system flaws because they're just excited to be novel users. And then you have, you know, about 34% of the population tends to be this early majority adopters. And then you have these late majority adopters, and then you have these laggards who tend to be resistant to technology for whatever reason. And it doesn't have to be technology, it could be any system. And so understanding, you know, what drives these individual profiles can also help inform, you know, what you should have your system, you know, enable. And so one of the major ways to influence system design is through affordances. And Don Norman really popularized this theory in the 80s through his book, The Design of Everyday Things. It's a good book. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to read that book. And so an affordance is the perceived and actual properties of something that suggest how the thing can possibly be used, right? And I think the best example is a door. We all go up to doors, and how many times do we walk up and we're confused, right? How we interact with the door, if we should push or we should pull it. Right, so if you walk up to a door and it's a flat plate affords that you can push it, right? There's nothing to grab onto, so it's very obvious a door with a flat plate needs to be pushed to open. You walk up to a door that has a handle, right? A handle affords both pushing and pulling, and so oftentimes that's when people can get confused on how to open a door, and so you'll often have to see a label on a door that has a handle telling someone that they should push it or pull it because the affordance is confusing. Just a few examples, right? I'm sure you could think of many doors that you interact with on a daily basis that have to be overcome. Their affordances have to be overcome by a label. And so a poor system design is one that has to rely on a bunch of instructions and labels for someone to understand how to use it. So that's some background. So let's dive into some more interesting applications of these theories. And so I frame this on 3 case studies that I have worked on in the past. I wouldn't say these are necessarily the best, but I had some slides already developed, so it wasn't a huge extra lift to put these ones together. And so this first one is how trust in an automated vehicle can change depending on what the in-vehicle HMI design looks like. And so in this study, we were interested in asking the questions, how does an infotainment system design? And I say infotainment, that's basically that touch screen in your vehicle that controls, you know, climate and navigation and phone and radio connectivity, etc. So that's an infotainment system. How does the design of that infotainment system in terms of the usability of it and the aesthetics of it affect a user's trust in an automated vehicle that has varying system performance? And then our second question was, is there a correlation between user experience and trust in automated vehicles? So again, really centered on how people trust an automated vehicle based on what that in-vehicle interface looks like and behaves to them. And so we did a driving simulator study. So that's a snippet of the driving simulator that we used. And you can see in the picture, the bottom right side is an example of that HMI we developed. And that we developed that in JavaScript. We created 4 different versions of that HMI. They all looked pretty similar, but with varying functionality that I'll talk about in a second. And basically the point of that was that we asked participants in our driving study to perform various music and climate tasks on that device. So we had 48 participants. Each participant drove 4 different times. It was about a 10-minute drive each participant. And in each of those 4 drives, there were 12 lead braking events. And across each of those drives, they experienced a different infotainment design. And half the participants, so 24, experienced a reliable automated vehicle where in all 12 of those events, the vehicle appropriately braked and then merged to the other lane to pass the vehicle. The other half of the participants experienced unreliable automation. And so in 3 of those 12 events, in all 4 scenarios, the vehicle would fail to brake, and if they didn't intervene, a crash would happen. And so this is just a diagram to demonstrate what this study design looked like. So basically we collected demographics, we taught people how to use the driving simulator, and then they did those 4 different drives. And this was randomized, so this is just one snippet. But that top example just shows 24 people had reliable automation and 24 people had unreliable automation. And so in one study or in one drive, someone's infotainment system would have good usability. So they'd press a button and it would respond appropriately. And the aesthetics looked good. And we did some pre-testing on this and we designed various interfaces and we did a user experience survey to figure out what was, considered good versus ugly aesthetics. And then another drive, they would also have good usability, but the aesthetics was ugly. It was raw. It was bare bones. It looked like, someone just threw the infotainment system together. And then they had bad usability. So they'd press a button and there'd be severe lag or the button wouldn't even have a response. And so they'd have to press it a couple times. So it's just poor reliability. And then same, the combination of an ugly aesthetic and a bad usability. So I'm going too in depth of what our results were, but I just wanted to give an example of some of the metrics that we looked at, and these are a combination of both objective and subjective measures. So one thing that we did is that we measured people's galvanic skin conductance. So you can put a sensor on someone's arm basically and measure the time it takes from one electrode to another farther down their arm. And the idea is you're going to have peaks in that value as people become more aroused. And so we found that people, started to pay more attention to the scenario when the infotainment system had bad usability, when they had to click it a bunch of times and they had to understand why it wasn't responding. And then even worse on when it was an unreliable automated vehicle, which makes sense. So nothing too surprising there. And then we asked people subjectively, various questions about their trust in the vehicle. And as you would expect, people who experienced the reliable automated vehicle had higher trust in the automated vehicle. And also what was interesting is the infotainment system that was nice aesthetically. People also associated that with just a better functioning automated vehicle. And then we also measured people's takeover behavior. So whether they chose to brake and let go of automated control. And of course, the unreliable automated vehicle had more braking events, which is what you would expect. But we also found that the infotainment system that had poor usability, so it was lagging and it just didn't work properly, also caused people to take over control from the automated vehicle. And so our overall conclusion from this is that trust is a systematic construct in the vehicle. So despite the fact that the infotainment system had absolutely no correlation with automated vehicle, right? The fact that your radio works or does not work has absolutely no bearing on if your automated vehicle is going to spot the car in front of you. But people had this association that the overall car is a system together and their trust changes as any component within the system changes. And so people are less likely to trust an automated vehicle that had a bad or an ugly infotainment system. So reliability and UX is important. So that was that study. Another study that we worked on was understanding the impact of having a HMI in the vehicle and how distractions and behavioral adaptations over time can change with your engagement with that HMI. And so in that study, we were interested in how do driving behaviors change while you're in a vehicle with automation, but then also what happens when we remove the automation and you're asked to resume manual control of a car. And so for that study, we did a 1-week-long longitudinal study. So people came in for, I think it was 8 different drives over the course of a week. And we had 30 participants who were our treatment group. And so they experienced a vehicle that had active lane keeping. So they didn't have to worry about steering. The vehicle would take care of that. And then we had a control group where just did the exact same study procedures, but they were under manual control the whole time. And the idea there, of course, is if you do a longitudinal study, you're going to expect to see people changing their behaviors. So we wanted to isolate what was just getting more comfortable with our study versus attributed to an active lane keeping system. And so during that, we asked people to do distracting tasks on a human-machine interface. And so I developed that app. You can see that highlighted in this picture here. I made that intentionally to look like Apple CarPlay at the time, and I programmed that in C#, and I was able to get back-end, performance metrics out of that, just like in the previous study. So I mentioned people came in for 8 different drives. The first drive was just baseline, so how you just drive in the driving simulator. And 2 through 7, that's when they did those distracting HMI tasks. So then drive 2 was that combination of manual driving plus engaging in a distraction. And then the middle 4 drives were the automation exposure for the treatment group. So they had the lane keeping system. And then we withdrew the lane keeping system for the final 2 drives and saw how they resumed back to manual driving. So a few measures here is that we looked at just driving performance in the simulator. And so this plot here is showing the standard deviation of lane position. So a higher value is indicative of worse driving, right? You're more likely to be veering all over the road. And so, and then the gray line is the control group that was just manual driving the whole time. And then the blue line is the treatment group who were exposed to the lane keeping. And so in drive 1 and 2, before they ever experienced the lane keeping system, both groups were pretty similar in their behaviors. We saw increased standard deviation in lane position in drive 2 because that's when they started engaging in the distracting task. And then in drives 3 through 6, that's when the lane keeping system was engaged, and our drivers that had the lane keeping system were better at staying along the center line, which is good because that was the whole point of the lane keeping system. And then in the last drives, when we asked them to resume back to manual control, we actually saw the first time that there was a significant increase in the ability to drive compared to that control group, where especially in drive 7, where they're still engaged in that distracting task, you see this huge peak in standard deviation lane position compared to the control group. And so one of the reasons for that is, again, because they're engaged in that in-vehicle infotainment system task. And so this is just showing in drives 2 through 7, which again were when they were engaging in distracting tasks at their will, how many tasks they completed. And so in drive 2, both manual control, we saw pretty similar number of tasks completed on that HMI. And then when the lane keeping system was engaged, people started to trust it and thought, hey, I can devote more time to this secondary task. And so they started really engaging with that HMI. And then when we removed the lane keeping system, good news is that they resumed to be pretty similar to that control group. You saw an overall increase because as people got used to our study, they were just more likely to engage in distracting tasks. And then we also measured a variety of metrics, but this is the only other one that I'm going to show you from this study. We also measured eye glance behavior. So we had a remote eye tracker that was positioned on the driving simulator so we could know where people are looking when. And so we measured how long people took their eyes off of the forward roadway and onto that HMI device. And so once again, right before they ever experienced lane keeping, both groups were very similar. This is showing the average glance that they would take off the road to that secondary device was about 1.5 seconds to complete the task. But then after they got used to the lane keeping system, they started relying on it, and then we pulled it away. We still saw that people remained looking down at that HMI for extended periods of time. So in drive 7, after they were exposed to a form of automation and then resumed control, they still had these residual behaviors where they were taking their eyes off the road for extended periods of time, up to 2 seconds, which is that threshold where NHTSA says that, your likelihood of getting in a crash is twice as much. And so that research has really formed a lot of the current studies that I'm working on or proposing to work on, where basically now that we know that these HMIs can be really crucial in, what people are doing in a vehicle, and potentially, especially as we increase the level of automation and people start thinking that it's safe to engage with them more, right? How can we create these in-vehicle displays to aid decision-making on when people should take over control of their vehicle, or when it's, the vehicle has full control and the automation is reliable. And so I've been working quite a bit on what components of information theory contribute most to aiding people in their decision-making for trust in an automated system. But I've also been looking in other systems, not just automated vehicle technology. And so I have some work in thinking about electric vehicle charging. And so what sort of information can you give someone on an app in their phone, for example, that will encourage them to, smart charge their car. So not charge their electric vehicle when the grid is at capacity or when there's, non-renewables that are powering the grid. Or also when they're driving a vehicle, how do you encourage them to do more, eco driving behaviors as opposed to, driving so that they get somewhere fast, despite whether or not it's, the most sustainable option. And then the last study that I was going to talk about today is a deviation of surface transportation. And this is looking at different HMI designs on building trust in an automated drone taxi. And so I have one of my PhD students works at Boeing. And so this is kind of her passion project through her work. And so that's how I've gotten involved in this work. So for those of you that aren't as familiar with urban air mobility, the idea is that our surface transportation streets are congested, especially in metro areas, but we have this completely unused low altitude airspace. So basically from 1,500 feet to about 4,000 feet, nothing flies in that area. So commercial jets have to, go above that space quite quickly. And so cities have realized that they have this, untapped capacity. And so there's quite a bit of research and development in these autonomous passenger aerial vehicles, or PAVs, or eVTOLs. And the idea is that they would hold 2 to 4 passengers and there would be no onboard pilot, and they would be electric and they could take someone from one side of a city to another. Uber had an arm of this. It was called Uber Air. They've since pulled out, but there's other many companies that are developing this technology and testing it around the world. And the idea would be you'd call it just like an Uber. You'd, be on one side of the city and you'd say, hey, I want to go to, this address. And you would let it know you'd want to take a PAV, and it would tell you where to pick it up, either at a helipad or on top of a building, and it would drop you off closest to your other location. But what we were really inspired by here is this notion, right? Like, would you get inside of a pilotless drone taxi and fly from one end of, a city you're familiar with to another? I absolutely would not. I don't even trust autonomous vehicles, right? And I know how to take over control. I know how to grab a steering wheel or grab, push on the brakes. And yet I'm still completely hesitant to trust an autonomous vehicle on surface roads, and let alone, right, a helicopter. Essentially, I have absolutely no idea how to fly one of those. And so we're really interested in what does it take to get people to actually trust these and ride these so that they're a viable market option. And so our research here is, what sort of HMI is needed inside of one of these PAVs to facilitate trust, and how do various technology adopter profiles, so going back to Rogers's diffusion of innovation of early to laggard adopters, and that in-vehicle display affect your trust in PAVs. And even though we're doing this in the PAV space, this could be applied to really any autonomous system. So think of an Uber that's, on a surface road, and it doesn't have a driver on board. What would be needed in that in-vehicle display to get people to feel comfortable riding in it? So we did a simulator study. Our simulator isn't quite as realistic as the one I have pictured here from Dolly. But we essentially put people in a dark room, and we had a couple of screens in front of them, and they sat in a chair, and we tried to make it look like a cockpit of a potential PAV. And so this is what our study design looked like, where we brought in people and we asked a pre-survey, and we grabbed only the people that identified as an early adopter or as a late adopter. So we had 2 as dichotomous groups as we could possible. We hooked them up to a heart rate monitor, so I do quite a bit of work in heart rate variability. I also do stuff with EEG, but I don't have anything in that space here because I'm just recently getting into that, and that's actually one of the tasks I have Pi helping me with, is what do we do with EEG data? And then we also had an eye tracker set up. And so we took our participants and they all completed 2 flights. It was a 6-minute flight from one side of Chicago to the other, and then back to their original destination or origin. So we had a 2-minute takeoff, and then we paused the scenario and we asked a situation awareness survey, basically 5 questions that asked, what was the color of the building in front of you? And, various questions that if they were paying attention to the scene, they would be able to answer fairly easily. And then we had a 5-minute cruise across the city. paused that, did another Sagat survey, and then we had the landing, and then paused that, had a Sagat survey, and then had a trust survey that broke up different components of trust. And that was without any sort of in-vehicle display. And then the second flight, we had them experience one type of HMI, and we repeated that whole thing again. And the idea is that, is there a difference in people's trust in the PAV depending on the type of HMI they had compared to other HMIs, but also just compared to the baseline of no HMI at all? And then does that change depending if you're an early versus a laggard adopter? And so this is the 4 different displays that my student designed. So basically that top left one is an information only display where it gives you a radar of other aircraft, origin, destination. It tells you how much battery is left, your speed, your altitude, and a little check of all the systems and assuring you that they're good. And then we hired this voice actor. You can see him at the bottom there. We gave him a script. We put him behind a green screen. And in that bottom left one, you can see he's dressed up. We told him just look like an office dad. He's wearing a polo. He has AirPods in. And he's basically, he doesn't look like he knows how to take over the airplane for you. But the point is that he's there. He's walking you through it. He's talking you through the whole flight. He's like, we're lifting off right now. Everything is going well. We have a few minutes left till our destination, etc. And you get that video display of him talking the whole time. And then that one next to it on the right, we had him do the exact same script, but we put him in front of a blue screen or green screen that made it look like he was in a control tower. We dressed him up like a pilot. He looks like he's trustworthy, like he could take over the flight if something went wrong. And then that top one is we stripped the video off of it, so it's just the audio of that same script. And so it's a radio communication. So the idea is the fact that he looks like a pilot versus just a regular guy versus you have no idea who you're talking to versus there's no person, it's information only. Does that change your perceived trust in a PAV? And we're doing that study right now, so I don't have the results, but hopefully in a couple of months I have some really cool findings on that space. So that's really all I had. Just, to recap, really most of my research is really focused on that HMI design and that trust and how we calibrate them, right? And that feedback loop of, if we manipulate the design to contain some information, how does that change people's perceived trust and capabilities of a system? And then how do we use that to make sure that HMI is appropriately designed? And if we do those things, hopefully we're creating these systems that are safe, they're efficient, they're sustainable, and they're enjoyable to use. So that's all that I have. I appreciate y'all listening to that. Hopefully you learned something or you got excited about human factors research.
Hey, great. We have a few minutes for questions for Erika.
Erika, well, I've got one. Did you see well, first I wanted to know if you've seen some of the work that Sundar has done. His first name is like SH some YAM, I should know, and I can send it to you. He was on campus just last week. He does a bunch of stuff with trust and technology, and he looks at affordances too. He talks about it in a little bit different way than you do, but not terribly different. But one of the things he looks at is trust, and he looks at the extent to which humans feel they're part of the process or part of the system. And like, if they're more in the system, do they feel more trust? They feel like it's a joint effort kind of a thing that he's been looking at. His tech sponsored him to come and talk. And so I was just curious if you'd seen some of the stuff that he had done or not, because I'm happy to, I think it's very related to what you're doing, and it's kind of cool stuff. And if you aren't, I'm happy to send you some stuff on that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I did see that ISTech announcement and I intended to go, but I did not. I think I'm familiar with his work, but that's a good reminder. I have his name, so I will definitely follow up and look at some of his recent publications. That's a good.
Yeah, it seems like some of his, he's kind of, because he's really looking at part of what he talked about when he was on campus was AI and trust in AI and people not understanding the system and people not, the extent to which they feel they have some control over what the system does or how they interact with it, then they were more willing to trust it. And he talks about trust and kind of conceptualizes it in a little bit different ways in some cases. So he's really big on a bunch of models. It was kind of fun from that standpoint. His first talk was the better one. If I can find out, I'll find out if that one was recorded. That the first talk, the public talk, he gave one to our department that wouldn't be as interesting, and that one wasn't recorded. But if that first one was, you might find that interesting. But thanks, this was really cool. I loved all the stuff you talked about, going back to Rogers and some of that cool stuff. And the only other question I had was, do you guys ever look at it sounds like you do, like the characteristics of the innovation, relative advantage, compatibility, all of that stuff when you're thinking of trust and that aspect of things?
Yeah, so like, I don't know if I followed that part.
It's so like with part of Rogers, he'll look at the innovation, and he'll look at like 5 characteristics of it, which are like complexity, compatibility, can you observe it? That's a big one. Can you try it out? And the relative advantage of it over what you currently do. And he'll look at how those interact with how people are then willing to adopt it and stuff like that. And it seems like a lot of what you're doing, you're measuring that stuff, and it could help with kind of understanding some of your results, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's good. Maybe it's adjacent to that. Usually I use his work to just kind of inform what people are, and then I manipulate like what that information, like complexity and quantity and filtering is. But yeah, kind of circling back is a good frame to take on that.
Yeah, I think, and it could be, it depends on like when you get your demographics and some of that stuff, what you capture, to see how that might help to explain some of the nuances that you may be seeing, that to kind of maybe understand a little bit more of what the human is thinking or their perception of a risk or something like that. But thanks, this was really cool. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having everyone listening. I appreciate a venue to talk at. Ellison,
yeah. And
oh, sorry, I just saw Ellison put in the chat.
Is it okay if I can just say it out loud? I just didn't know if we'd run out of time, but this has been a highly anticipated talk, and I really loved it. I learned a lot from you, Erika, and get really excited about your work. My question, there can be so many more that I'd rather ask, but this one I think relates to our project, which is like, where, based on your study of trust, where do you think would be like some of the most fruitful areas to study trust in the home environment?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think like there might just be this over trust of the home as this like, safe haven entity. And so it's like, how do you give people like, your air quality might not be as good as you think, and these behaviors actually are undermining your potential health and safety. So yeah, maybe it's like, yeah, what information we can give to them so that they have realistic expectations of their home and the actions they need to take.
I love that. That's my newest surprising thing I've learned. That's really not what I would think of. So thanks. That's really cool.
We need to break trust, you're saying?
Right. It's calibrating trust appropriately is what I like to say.
Ooh, that's really diplomatic. I like that.
So I think as usual, there could be a whole separate meeting in which we ask about the implications of this for what we need to do in Sapphires. I feel the same way about Marilee's presentation. And so I wonder if we should put some of those on the calendar for the summer, like go back and rewatch and then come with questions, and we just have a Q&A. So those are some ideas. Because I have like a lot of really specific questions, like, okay, we're gonna do this in our field project. How does that relate? So I think, yeah, that we should capitalize on this knowledge, and thank you so much for sharing it. Okay, next Friday, we are getting into May, the last week of class for those of us who are involved in that sort of stuff. Yay, go us, we can do it. And then Paul and Misa, thank you for stepping up just to inform us about the filters. Something I'd like to drop in people's heads to perhaps talk about sometime in May is, I think we'd really benefit from an in-person meeting, like hands-on half-day meeting, to kind of pound out the field study. It may be, I know summers are hard, so we can think about that, but just know that that's on my mind. Thank you, Erica. This was really fun. I want to come play with all your toys and break them.
Thanks.
Thanks, Erica.
And welcome again, Pi.
Thank you. See you guys.
Bye.